Now, who is Zoe, who is the expert midwife? And as I was explaining, this week is still very much World Breastfeeding Week.
Yeah.
So we're really lucky that this week we got the chance to speak to Olivia on Tuesday about all things breastfeeding. And then after that, we put out to you guys, like, do you have any more questions that we can then put to Zoe, who is MAM's expert midwife? So, Zoe, I know that you've already got a few questions that came in, and then, as we said, we're going to be happy to answer any more that might come in. And then, if
Yep.
we run out of time, we can take those away. And I know that you guys are always giving advice out, aren't you, on this kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, if there's any questions that I don't answer, or we get to the end of the live and someone has a question for me, they can find me over at MAM, so they can just send a message to customer services and it finds its way to me, or just hit DM us, and you've got my email as well. So yeah, I'm always happy to answer questions on anything sort of baby feeding and midwifery related. That's what I'm here for. So
Amazing. Well, how about we we'll dive straight in with the ones that we've had in so far.
yeah.
So, after our chat with Olivia, we had a question in that was about the best positions for breastfeeding after a C-section.
Oh, that's a really good question. So, when it comes to breastfeeding after a C-section, I'm going to start right at the beginning, because there's a few other little bits here that could be quite useful to know about as well. So, first and foremost is when you have your baby, when you are in the theatre, ask them to. Most places automatically do it, but ask for baby to put skin to skin with you after the birth. So lots of people don't realise this as they've never had a C-section before, but this is something that can be done in theatre. So baby's next to your skin. So as well as being just lovely for a cuddle, great for bonding, it's also really good to get babies starting to get stimulated for that first breastfeed, so they can smell mum and all of that. So have baby skin to skin. I've also looked after mums before when babies actually started breastfeeding on the theatre table as well, because they're close to mum's breast, they just latch on. So that's great. It just gets things going. So after that point, once perhaps you're in recovery and you're just sort of feeding more yourself and you're able to start feeding, it's really important that you make sure that you are comfortable. So if you require any pain relief or anything like that, make sure that you ask for it. And also ask your midwife who's looking after you, or if it's a recovery nurse, for lots of support with pillows, just to make sure that you're feeling really comfortable, because those things are really important for anyone breastfeeding, but especially if you've just had a big operation on your tummy, you could feel a little bit sore. So make sure your comfort levels are addressed first, and make sure you're not feeling sick or anything like that. And then once you're at that stage, you can start having a look at different positions, and it's always good to have a look online beforehand, especially if you know you're going to have a planned C-section, about different positions. So I've got my feeding demo doll here. So one of the most common way, I'm going to just move back a little bit so you can see. So one of the most common ways that we think of breastfeeding babies would be just, the common sort of more cradle hold, which is like this. But if you've just had a C-section, or if you're feeling quite laid back in a bed after a C-section and you're more comfortable like that, this might not be the easiest position for you. You might find the laid back position easier. So that would be when mum's laying back. If I kind of demo it like this, mum's laying back and then baby is laying sort of down her body. And you can put baby diagonal so it misses the where you've had your incision there, where your C-section scar is. So baby can be laying diagonal. They can be sort of more koala over one of your legs, depending on sort of how you're sitting and how you're comfy. The other position to try would be the underarm position. And this is good if you're perhaps more sat upright. Again, get plenty of cushions and things to help you. And that's the one when you lay baby sort of under your arm, and baby will latch onto the breast this way, but then their body runs around the side of you. And again, they're going to completely avoid putting that pressure on your tummy or where you've had your C-section, so it won't feel really, really sore there. And the other one, and again, this one will be good for perhaps when you're a little bit more mobile, or when you're at home, and that would be laying down on the bed. So if you're in hospital, you get someone to assist you to lay the bed completely flat, and you lay on your side, and then you have baby sort of feeding alongside you like this, laying on the bed. And again, the bed's taking all the weight of baby. They should be sort of free from touching your tummy, no pressure on your belly at all. And again, once you go home, that's going to be a really good position if you're feeling a little bit tender and you're trying to sort of get to grips with the feeding.
So quite a few to try.
That's for you to try, yeah.
Yeah,
Is
just
it
looking
any?
for everything.
Yeah, well, any breastfeeding person that, you know, anyone that's hoping to breastfeed if they're pregnant, one of my top tips would be to just, even if you can attend a breastfeeding group, which is amazing if you can do it, if you can attend a class, go for it. But if you can, just get to grips, have a look on like NHS websites and things like that, like a trusted source. Find somewhere that will show you the different positions for breastfeeding, because sometimes babies will prefer. I know when I breastfed mine, one of my girls, she preferred one side. So, and if I could feed her like this on this side, and then if I flipped her to feed her the other side, she just didn't want to. So the best way for her was it was purely a positional thing. So I'd feed her like this, and then we'd go rugby ball to feed the other side, her underarm, because it didn't turn her around, and then she was happy. So it's just good to have that knowledge, you know, there ready if you think, right, okay, this is a bit tricky, what can I try?
Definitely.
Yeah.
The next question is, sometimes my baby gets to crying pitch and I struggle to latch her. Do you have any advice for this?
Oh yeah, that's really difficult. And first of all, that's really normal. Like babies do cry, and sometimes it's so difficult, especially if it's your first baby and you're thinking, what's wrong? You know, am I doing something really wrong here? So the first thing I'd say is just try not to panic. Easier said than done, but just try not to panic. The next thing to do, go back to the basics and think, right, okay, is there anything that's up with baby? Because sometimes perhaps you're there really trying to get baby to feed, they're due a feed, you're thinking, oh, why aren't they feeding? And that's all you're focused on. Actually, baby might have done a great big poo and need their nappy change. So try and sort of ground yourself and stay calm and go, right, okay, does baby need anything? You know, is the room really hot or cold? Do they need a fresh nappy first? Do we need to just kind of start again? And once you've addressed all those things, and you know that sort of from a comfort perspective, it's nothing that's upsetting baby, perhaps they've got themselves over hungry or something like that, then you can try and put baby skin to skin. So one thing I will say is it's incredibly difficult to get a baby that's crying latched onto the breast, because they're crying and it just doesn't happen. So the best thing to do is just get baby calm again, and just forget getting baby on the breast, get them calm, and then try and latch them on again. So skin to skin is always going to be a best friend for that one. So strip baby off down to their nappy, and then tuck them up on your chest so they're nice and close to you. If you hold them in that more laid back position, and you're laid back, say on the bed or the settee, while you're holding on to them in that skin to skin position, you may even find that they actually, as they calm, will latch their self on. If they don't, keep them calm, keep that skin to skin going until things are settled down, and then try to latch them back on the breast again. If you find that this isn't calming them down, another one that's a really good one to try is, if you've got to the stage that your baby's having ready to have their baths and things, is if you do something that's going to slightly distract them. So perhaps getting in the bath with your baby, and that warm water, make sure it's not too hot and everything, and it's safe for baby. Have baby in the bath with you, so it's that nice warm water around you both. Slight distraction could be comforting for them if it's a bit of trapped wind that's making them cry or anything, and then try and latch them on the breast again. It's surprising how slight distraction and tweaking things so slightly can really sort of help them to calm down, to have that to latch on. And again, if all those things just aren't working and you know that your baby's due a feed, you can also try and do a little bit of hand expressing, and just express out a few drips of milk, and then on your clean finger with short nails, you can just sort of finger feed it to baby, just so they can get a little taste for it. And again, that might just calm them down enough that they go, hang on a sec, mum's here with the boobs, let's latch on and have a little feed. So those are things you can try. And obviously, if your baby is crying to the point that you're concerned, you know, seek medical advice for them. But chances are it could just be a little bit of trapped wind, or they're just, you know, getting a bit teasy because they haven't, you know, they've gone a little bit too long without a feed and they're hungry and are getting a bit frantic at the breast.
So a bit of trial and error as well.
Yeah.
Then the next question is, I'd like to share feeds with my husband. How do I go about introducing a bottle to my baby?
Okie dokie. So that's a really common question. So the first thing that's most important is, if you are introducing a bottle to a breastfed baby, is to make sure that your breastfeeding has established. Now that can take several weeks. We used to say 6 weeks for everybody, but actually we now know that's not really the case, because you might have a very experienced breastfeeding mum who has, you know, the breastfeeding's been going textbook from the very beginning, and she perhaps may get to 5 weeks and say, do you know what, we're good, I know this is all happening as it should, baby's doing well, no concerns, milk supply's regulated, I'm going to start introducing a bottle now. Whereas you might have a mum that's had a more challenging time with breastfeeding, and it might take her more like your 8-9 weeks to get to a place that she feels like super confident that, you know, introducing a bottle is the right time. So again, wait till the breastfeeding's established and make sure that you are emotionally ready and it's what you want to do to introduce a bottle. And in that time, if you've got a partner, co-parent, your friend who's absolutely chomping at the bit to bond with baby because you're breastfeeding, you know, there are so many ways that you can bond with a baby apart from feeding them. So sing to them, read to them, skin to skin, lots of things they can do. So encourage them to bond with baby in all those other ways while you're waiting to get to the right stage to introduce the bottle. Then when it comes to expressing, if you're choosing to express your breast milk and to give the bottle, again, it's just to make sure that you just express what milk you need. You don't want to go wild with it because your breasts work on supply and demand. So if you suddenly, you know, your breasts get used to this sort of your loose feeding pattern that your baby does, sort of, you know, adding cluster feeding and things as well, but your body will get used to the pattern of feeding that your baby does on the whole. And then if you suddenly go hell for leather with breastfeeding and expressing and you go mad with it and express more, your body can't tell the difference between that's your baby cluster feeding and actually just pumping. And what can happen then is you can come into this huge oversupply of your milk, which sounds great, but it can actually cause quite a lot of problems. So just to express the amount of milk that you need for each feed, and you can incorporate that into your daily routine, whatever works for you. And then it would be just to feed baby the bottle. So you can find a bottle that works for you, that you're happy with, and then to go for a slow flow teat. That's what breastfeeding babies prefer because it's nice and slow and it mimics the way that they feed from the breast more. If you go for too fast a flow, it can confuse them and they don't like it as much. So it's better to stick with the slow flow teat. And then to go with your paced bottle feeding. So with paced bottle feeding, that would be when you, instead of holding baby like this and holding the bottle directly like that, so gravity and the milk is flowing really fast down through the bottle into baby's mouth. Paced bottle feeding is when you hold baby slightly more upright, and instead of holding your bottle like this, you hold it more sort of horizontal, so the milk is just tipped into the teat, and then that just slows down the speed in which baby's taking that milk. And this is, again, this works really well with the breastfed babies. So slow it down and then give them little breaks in between. You know, perhaps you can bring any burps up, but just take lots of little breaks. Take your time with it because that mimics more how a baby will feed at the breast. So the sucking and the stopping and taking little pauses. Oh, what else? Make sure that when you introduce the bottle, baby's not feeling super hungry, because if a baby is really, really hungry and they're breastfed, all they're going to want is the breast. They're going to think, I don't want that bottle or that thing that I'm not used to. I want the breast, and they just won't entertain it. So what you want to do is make sure that baby is happy and looking for a little feed, so nibblish, and then you can give them a little bit of the bottle to start trialing it. Sometimes it helps as well if your baby's reluctant to take the bottle. It can help to point baby out, so they're looking around like this, and then you give them their bottle like that just while you're introducing it. Look around the room, a little bit of distraction, because that can really help as well with, you know, if they're just focused on the breast, that little bit of distraction can make them take the bottle better.
I think this links quite nicely into the question around that somebody had that said, I'm going to a wedding next month, so I'll be away from baby for a night. How can I start to prepare for this? So I guess you've already given some tips on how to introduce the bottle, but I, from personal experience, I really struggled. I think I maybe left it a bit too long to even try a bottle, and then I started to panic about leaving him for like a few hours or even a night. And I read myths about being in the room, like maybe I should not be in the room at that time. Like, have you got any advice on that so that the mum feels like they can actually go away for that night and feel comfortable?
So first things, I completely understand where you're coming from with that, because with my first, I breastfed both of mine, and with my first, I knew I should have given her a bottle, because I thought perhaps it would give me a bit of a breather every now and again to like go have a coffee with my friends, baby free, just to have like for your mental health. But because the breastfeeding had gone so well and that like bond you get with them, I felt quite protective over my breastfeeding as well. Like, I don't want someone else to feed it, it's my job. And when it came to introducing the bottle to her, she was slightly more tricky to get her to take the bottle. And we got there in the end. And then with my second, I was more open-minded because my first was only 2. So I had to kind of juggle my time. So she did have the odd bottle of express milk, and she had hers earlier, and she took to it fine. But I think that there's no right way. You've just got to feel that you're it's really personal, isn't it? It's like, as you say, like when, you know, because I remember Edith, my first, being actually a few months old, and a fellow midwife saying to me, has she had a bottle yet? And I was like, no. And she goes, oh, if you ever want to leave her, she should have had it about 6 weeks. And I remember thinking, oh, I've ruined it. She'll never take one. But I think it just depends on the baby. And there are lots of tips, like you say. So you can go for the whole distraction thing, like we spoke about. So walking around a room, slight bit of gentle motion in your arms while baby's facing out. Those sorts of things can really help. Have someone else other than the breastfeeding mum give the bottle. So your partner, a friend, your mum, or whatever, that get them to give the bottle so the baby can't smell you, because obviously can associate you with the breastfeed. It might help for mum not to be in the house, because or just to leave the room again, because if they see you, it depends on the age of the baby, they're going to be thinking, hang on a minute, you can come back, I know what I want. So sometimes it is better to leave the room. And sort of speaking as a mum that's breastfed, I think I found it easier to leave the room when my girls were having their first bottles and things, because I think I was a bit like, oh no, just they don't like it, you're doing it a bit wrong. I think it's better just to kind of get out the house. The other thing I would say as well is, if you have an event coming up, say like you've got a wedding in 2 months' time and you're thinking ahead, I would definitely say try to introduce that bottle as soon as you know there's this time coming up where you're going to be separated from your baby, because the last thing you need is that extra row, especially when you've got something nice coming up, like a night away. You could be really looking forward to that, and then lo and behold, a few days before you go to give baby a bottle and they won't take it, all of a sudden it feels like a big disaster, and it's really worrying. So try and get yourself in a bit of a routine beforehand, that you know baby will accept a bottle, and they enjoy that feed and it all works really well. And again, when it comes to pumping, so if you're away for a night, be led by your baby on how often they feed. You don't need to go wild, but you know, your fridge, your breast milk will store in the fridge and the freezer for a certain amount of time. So just make sure that you've you know, got a stash there ready, but don't go wild with like power pumping and all of this sort of stuff, you know, the week before, because then when you go, you're going to have really full breasts that could feel quite uncomfortable. So again, just like pump as and when you can, sort of incorporate into your routine to build enough milk for your baby for that night.
That's actually a really good point you made about feeling quite full when you're away from baby as well. So I guess, would your advice be to take a pump with you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, some people choose to hand express, but again, speaking from personal experience, you can feel really uncomfortable if you've got a baby, and you know, if you're away from your baby overnight and you've got a little one that still feeds overnight, you know, even if they don't feed that much overnight, or they feed first thing in the morning, you could wake up and your breast can feel incredibly full, and they can feel so full to the point they feel quite uncomfortable, and you need to relieve them for comfort. And also, when they're very full, they can leak. So you know, if you're on an evening away, you're going up for a meal, you don't want to have leaky boobs. So I would definitely recommend taking a pump away. You can take like just a manual pump just for relief, or you can go, take your electric pump with you, whatever you've got really, and whatever works for you. But I would definitely say to express for relief while you're away and while you're separated from baby. And some places there'll be a place that you can store that milk, so it doesn't mean you've got to chuck it either. You can store it for next time you're away. Just
Perfect.
home.
Well, obviously, MAM do a whole array of pumps, so that leads on quite nicely to the next question, which is, what is the difference between the double and the single breast pump?
So basically, they are both electric breast pumps. They both do the same job, but your single breast pump will pump one breast at a time, and your double breast pump will pump both breasts simultaneously. So that's really down to personal preference in which pump you want to get. I think for most mums who are breastfeeding on the whole, choosing to pump, to express the odd bottle for baby, or perhaps returning to work and just need to pump a little bit on their lunch break or whatever, just for relief, or so they can have some milk to take home for baby, or however they're working it. Usually a single pump works quite well, because you might have just fed baby on one breast and be thinking, okay, I need to pump, so you pump on the other. However, there's definitely places when double pumps are brilliant. It might be that you are choosing to exclusively pump and feed baby or breast milk by bottle, if that's your choice. You know, having a double pump, you're going to get a simultaneous letdown. You're going to pump simultaneously. It's going to speed up that process instead of doing it one at a time. A lot of mums, you know, if their babies are on the neonatal unit, perhaps if they've been born prematurely, and they are breastfeeding and taking their express milk in for baby, and again, if they know that they're not going to be able to actually put baby to their breast for a little while, which sometimes happens, you know, having a double pump at home could be really handy, because you need to keep that pumping frequent to keep your milk supply up for when baby can eventually latch to the breast. So again, having a double pump is just going to speed it up. So it's all down to sort of your personal situation and your personal preference and how you're choosing to feed baby. And I would definitely say, if you're not too sure, if you're thinking, where do I fit in that, would just be to ask your midwife or ask a feeding advisor, because they'll be able to sort of look at you and your situation and what you're choosing to do and say, right, do you know what will be right for your needs would probably be this one, and they can advise you with that.
Lovely. And someone's actually just asked now, should they buy a pump just in case? I'm guessing then maybe they haven't had a baby yet and they're thinking ahead. Would you buy one before or after you've started breastfeeding?
It completely depends on how you imagine your breastfeeding journey going. So if you are, you know, if you're planning to breastfeed, it's still advisable not to pump in those first few weeks while your breastfeeding is establishing. So, you know, it may be that you would want to wait and see how your breastfeeding is going first, and then you choose to buy a pump if you think, you know, my breastfeeding is going great, I'm looking to, you know, get back to my exercise class that I love, so baby's going to be having a bottle a week, so I need to get a pump. You know, at that stage, it might be that you choose to buy it then. Other people like to be really organised and think, right, I know, like, you know, there's so many mums out there now that are like, right, I know I've got to go back to work. You know, when baby's 3 months old, I absolutely want to breastfeed. That's the pump I want. Then go ahead and buy it. If you absolutely know that it's what you want to do. There's no right or wrong answer really. It's just sort of depends on your own personal. Because you know, again, you get the flip side of that. You get some mums that say, I'm not interested. I don't really want to do the whole expressing thing. You know, I just want to put baby to my breast, and that's fine as well.
Perfect. And actually, guys, we have got a giveaway with MAM running all month, and you can win double breast pump with the rechargeable battery. So keep an eye out for that to enter. I've just seen somebody mention combi feeding.
I know. I
So,
think it's right. It's something about using Was it using Can we scroll back? Can we scroll back to have a little look?
oh yeah.
I know it's 6 weeks for combi feeding, but what about soothers and dummies? Should I wait for 6 weeks also? So I would say yes. So soothers, I used them with both of mine, and I breastfed both until they were toddlers with no problems. But definitely wait again until your breastfeeding is established, just so you know that at that first sort of approximate 6 weeks, that first period of time where you're waiting for breastfeeding to establish, try and just keep it to you and your baby, putting them to the breast and just letting it all settle down. Because you don't want to give baby at that point a soother and mask cluster feeding, because that could knock your milk supply. So you just want to make sure that everything is going well with the breastfeeding first. And again, once you're at the stage that your breastfeeding's established, you're confident latching baby on, they're gaining good amounts of weight, you're not getting sore, you know, everything's going well, milk supply is regulated. If you choose to introduce a soother at that stage, that's absolutely fine if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. It was
Thank
amazing.
you.
Okay.
Okay,
Have a good weekend.
and you, bye.
Bye.